everybody. I hope you're having a great day. I hope you are safe and well and working in your classes and ready to finish the semester strong. Um, I'm going to give you a rundown of Chapter 13, which is Critical Thinking in Morality. In morality, not immorality. And so we're going to talk through some moral arguments and a coherent worldview. So that should be fun. Okay. So I'm in Chapter 13. In the introduction, he gives us an introduction. We have come far. We have seen that we can productively apply critical thinking to everyday claims, arguments, and problems, to explanations in a wide range of subject areas, to scientific theories of all sorts, and to offbeat theories of the paranormal and supernatural kind. Now we go even further to issues concerning morality. Um, a lot of people don't want to talk about this. Because they get all stuck in religion and morality, and that's not what we're talking about here at all. Although I believe your religion plays a big part in your morality, excuse me, or lack thereof. And so morality, and this is a big word, but it's not in the glossary, so you're going to have to look at page 480. Morality concerns beliefs about right and wrong, good and bad, just and unjust. That's the bare bones version. There are other definitions of morality depending upon which kind of ethics you ascribe to. Okay. Again, the worldview is a philosophy of life, a set of beliefs and theories that help us make sense of a wide range of issues in life. Okay. Now, moral arguments are built from moral statements. A statement asserting that an action is right or wrong, moral or immoral, or that something, such as a person or motive, is good or bad. Okay, so that's a moral statement. Our big word from this chapter is morality. Morality concerns beliefs about right and wrong, good and bad, and just and unjust. Remember, it's not in the glossary, but it is in your PowerPoint, slide number 5, or it's also in the chapter, page 480. And so we have some problems about is moral reasoning, is morality even possible? Okay, some people claim that moral reasoning is not possible because moral statements are not statements at all. And this is called emotivism. Okay, emotivism says that moral statements are just not the kinds of things that can be true or false. Our everyday moral experience seems to suggest that we sometimes have moral disagreements with others. And so emotivism says that nothing is good or bad, right or wrong because these terms don't refer to anything. That means good doesn't refer to anything, bad doesn't refer to anything. You can see the problem here, right? But our moral experience appears to suggest that some things really are good or bad, right or wrong. Many philosophers believe that these considerations show that emotivism must be mistaken. We are justified in believing what common sense tells us unless we have good reason to doubt it. Okay, so keep that in mind. So the answer to is moral reasoning possible? Well, of course it is. Of course it is. Okay. What makes a moral argument? And so here's an example, and then we're going to show what the pieces are. So argument 1 is on page 482. Says, it is wrong to inflict unnecessary pain on a child. Spanking inflicts unnecessary pain on a child. Therefore, spanking is wrong. Okay. A standard moral argument has this form for good reason. Okay. It needs a moral statement to establish the argument. It is wrong to. Okay. It needs a bridge that connects the premise to the conclusion. Okay. It's a standard statement that connects the two. We do this all the time in our syllogisms. And then it needs a conclusion that is also a moral statement. Therefore, spanking is wrong. Okay. I don't necessarily believe that part, but I think spanking can be wrong. I think also there are certain things that, that's your only recourse. Anyway, moral and non-moral statements. When we're unsure whether something is a moral statement or not, we need the context of the statement. Sometimes what seems like a moral statement I'm opposed to abortion, for example, is really a report on someone's state of mind. However, the same statement can be a moral statement if the person is answering a question about whether abortion is right or wrong. Okay, I feel that. So they're hedging a little bit, saying that I think it's wrong, and you can take that with whatever grain you would give me. Okay. Now we're going to use this next piece on the exam, and so slides 9 and 10 are going to be very important to you because moral disagreements, and we think, especially in our partisan country right now, in debates about pulling the okay, so let me go through this. Despite the prevalence of moral disagreements on countless issues, there is a surprising amount of agreement in moral arguments, in moral principles. And often the bone of contention in moral arguments is not the moral premise, which may be widely accepted, but the non moral ones. In debates about pulling the plug in severely comatose patients, for example, all parties may agree that murder is wrong, but disagree about the nature of comatose patients. Some may insist that comatose patients are entities that can be murdered because they are fully human, true persons, etc. Others that comatose patients are not the kind of entities that can be murdered because they are not persons, for example. So there may not be as much moral disagreement in the world as you might think, but here's a list of common moral principles. And these are things that most folks who debate or argue about morality, they believe these things are true, or they believe these things are at play. Okay, so personal benefit: acknowledge the extent to which an action produces beneficial consequences for the individual in question. Principle of benevolence: help those in need. Principle of harm: do not harm others. Principle of honesty: do not deceive others. Principle of lawfulness: do not violate the law. Principle of autonomy: acknowledge a person's freedom over his or her or their actions or physical body. Principle of justice: acknowledge a person's right to due process, fair compensation for harm done, and fair distribution of benefits. Principle of rights: acknowledge a person's rights to life, information, privacy, free expression, and safety. Okay, that little set of human rights are part of the Statement on Human Rights published by the UN. Years and years ago, by the way. Okay, so moral premises. We have learned already that in good arguments, the inferences are valid or strong, and the premises, whether moral or non-moral, are true. This latter stipulation means that to make good arguments, you must ensure that the premises are backed by good reasons and not simply assumed without warrant. We know from various chapters, right? It's not good to believe something if there's no back for it. Okay. So if we can support our moral judgments, with good reasons, and provide explanations of why these reasons matter, and show that the case on the other side is weak, what more in the way of proof could anyone possibly want? So says James Rachels. Okay, crucial sentence. Gauging the truth of moral premises, moral statements, mostly involves examining the support they get from three sources. 1, other moral principles. 2, moral theories. And 3, considered moral judgments. It's on page 485. It's also, again, I think on 91. So the moral criteria of adequacy is a little less complicated than our regular one, but it still gets at the points. So it's consistency with our considered moral judgments, reflective equilibrium. Basically, do I have that somewhere? Maybe not. Yes, I do on the next slide. Consistency with our experience of the moral life. Our moral experience includes making moral judgments, having moral disagreements, and occasionally acting immorally. Sometimes we break our own rules. Workability in real life situations is the third one. Help solve problems, guide actions, and reconcile clashing beliefs. Support for moral premises. Okay, other moral premises, moral theories, considered moral judgments. Moral judgments that we consider credible after we carefully and dispassionately reflect on them. So we can't give a considered moral judgment in the heat of the moment. This is something that requires a step away, take a deep breath at least, and reflect on, okay, is this really true? Does this really work? Is this something I'm willing to agree with? And making sure that those things pop up true, and then you can do your considered moral judgments. Okay, moral theories theories of morality are attempts to explain what makes an action right or wrong, or what makes a person or motive good. They try to specify what all right actions and all good things have in common. As such, they can give support, guidance, and validation to our moral decision making, shaping our moral principles, judgments, and arguments. Okay, so moral theories, and we're going to walk through a few of those, at least two, maybe three. Anyway, we have tried to explain in general how we determine whether something is right or wrong, good or bad, just or unjust. Okay. Evaluating moral theories. This is slide 16. Still have a few more to go. We use the same basic process to evaluate moral theories as we've used to evaluate other kinds of theories, everyday, scientific, weird. To identify the best theory, we must compare competing theories and use the criteria of adequacy to appraise their worth. Okay, that's normal for any theory, right? How are moral theories like scientific theories? Well, recall that scientific theories try to explain the causes and events of everything from tumor growth to exploding stars. On the one hand, a plausible scientific theory is one that's consistent with all the relevant data. Moral theories, on the other hand, try to explain what makes an action right or wrong, what makes a person good. A plausible moral theory must be consistent with the relevant data. Okay, so if somebody does a certain thing, that makes them a good person. If somebody does another certain thing, that makes them a bad person. Okay, and we go on from there. Okay, critiquing moral theories. This is one of those further thought boxes. I think I need to wet my whistle so I can speak correctly. Okay, so remember back in chapter 2, we talked about relativism and how relativism really doesn't work. We're insistent that it does, but it really doesn't work. Things are true. They're not just true for you or true for me. They're just true. And so this is another aspect of that. Most moral philosophers believe that some moral theories are better than others. Here are 4 controversial ones, and a little bit about their critique. Okay, so subjective moral relativism. It states that what makes an action right or wrong for someone is that it is approved by that person. Okay, I say it's right for me. And we've seen the problems with that in lots of ways. But really, the big deal here is it can't be that way because we are not infallible. Same thing with social moral relativism. Doesn't work. You can't say, oh, well, it's true for that society, so it's good. True, good. Okay, so social relativism implies, and this is also an interesting thing to think about. Social relativism implies that it would be impossible to disagree with one society and be right. Okay, that's a scary thought right now. Has been off and on forever, but still. Social reformers such as Martin Luther King Jr. or Gandhi could not claim that an action approved by society is wrong. Okay, but they were right. Racism is wrong. In any way, shape, form, or fashion, as my husband would say. And for Gandhi, India needed to be its own country. Go figure, right? But this idea that if social relativism is correct, then the people who live in that society can't correct it. And that would be very scary for all of us. Okay. And a lot of that is going on right now. So, a couple more critiques. Ethical egoism. In this view, what makes an action right is that it promotes one's own best interest. It doesn't mean that you can do anything you want, because long term, that's not going to be good for you. Okay. But what it does approve of is any action that would be in your best interest, regardless of how it works for other people or doesn't, um, is good and right. And the example they give is pretty extreme, but okay. So if it would be in your best interest to kill your boss, and as long as you could do so without negative repercussions, like getting caught, you are morally, how's it go? It is your moral duty to kill your boss. Now, none of us, hopefully, none of us believe that, okay? So, ethical egoism, even though it's doing what's in your best interest, you really do have to think about other people, okay? Um, I like the remembrance, do no harm. In all you do, do no harm. And yeah, there's a lot of other things that go along with that. But anyway, the last one that they dissect here is divine command theory. This is the idea that God makes morality, right and wrong are constituted by the will of God. Right actions are those commanded by God, wrong actions are those prohibited by God. So the problem here is, as most philosophers see it, are actions right because God says they are, or does God say they are because they're right? And this is a whole bucket of fish, can of worms. Anyway, um, really, if you are a person of faith, you trust that God is right and good, and telling you what to do is a good thing. It's not exactly this divine command theory, so don't think this is anti your religion. This is a way of processing what Scripture, or what your holy text says, and saying, oh, well, how do you know? Well, we know. Anyway, so there's two other pieces of, two other kinds of ethics that he dissects in great detail in the book. Here's the condensation. Okay, so traditional utilitarianism was founded by Jeremy Bentham and refined, keep finding typos, and refined by John Stuart Mill. Yes, the same guy who did the correlation stuff back a couple chapters ago. So, in a nutshell, right actions are those that achieve the greatest happiness for the greatest number. Okay? And it works okay. It can't do everything. It can't, found all kinds of things. So, anyway, what's best for the most? And if you're a Star Trek fan, think about the Spock thing. Kantian ethics was founded by Immanuel Kant. He says morality is about conforming your actions to universal moral rules derived from reason and doing so for duty's sake alone. Okay, so morality is non-emotional. Yikes. Okay, so he says act only on that maxim through which you can get at the same time. Act only on that maxim through which you can at the same time will it should become a moral law. So basically, what if everybody did this? Okay, that's the question before the morality. And while it sounds really good, we can't always do that. Okay, so anyway, both of them have problems. And Dr. Vaughn gives you pages on them. So have party. The last piece of the last chapter is a coherent worldview. Okay, our good theories must not conflict. Remember, the way we get at the best theory is to make sure that all the competing theories are consistent within themselves and consistent with the data. Okay, so our moral theory can conflict with our view of human freedom. Okay, our theory about the existence of God can conflict with our scientific theory about the nature of the universe. Doesn't have to. Our theory of the mind can be in conflict with theories of personal survival after death. And then my added one, our theory of education can be in conflict with our job description or educational mandates. Happens all the time. So our worldviews are composites of theories, including theories of morality. A good worldview must consist of good theories, but it also must have internal consistency. The theories composing our worldview must not conflict. Okay? Our worldviews are far too important not to subject them to intelligent, reasoned reflection. So, in the end, and at the beginning, Socrates was right. The unexamined life is not worth living. Okay? Not in the sense of if somebody doesn't reflect on their own lives, they should die. That's not what he means. He says, for him and for all of us, if we're not willing to look at what makes us who we are, your worldview paper, if we're not willing to look at how we differ from those around us and how we can kind of bridge that gap, then why bother? Okay. The last piece there, too, Thomas Jefferson. Reason and free inquiry are the only effectual agents against error. Thomas Jefferson. So if we ask questions, that's free inquiry. We have to ask questions until we understand how it works, or what we're supposed to do, or who we are. Okay, and so between Jefferson and Socrates, we have kind of the crux of living. Pay attention, make sure that you make changes when you find errors, that kind of thing. Be open-minded, help other people, that kind of stuff. I hope this has been helpful for chapter 13. It's our last little piece here. The next time you see me, I'll be walking you through the study guide for exam 4, and then we'll be done. So I hope this helped. Again, if you have questions, you know how to get a hold of me. You have my email. Bye.